All right, we're running a little bit late, but we'll go ahead and get started. All right, I'm going to straighten this camera out just a little bit because when I look up, it makes me feel wonky when it's all sideways. Feel like I'm on a ship. Whew, that's a lot better. Whew, I don't get seasick. All right, if you're ready, you guys ready online? All right, today is Sunday, April 16th, 2023, and this is my little Bible study. And we're Sunday night edition, so we're back in the book of Genesis in chapter 14. All right, let's talk a little bit about what we've already talked about. We've been talking about Abraham, right? Abraham, his original name is Abram. All right, either tonight or next week, we're going to get his name changed to Abraham. We'll talk a little bit about what that means with his name being changed. All right, but he has this little tag-along from his brother named Lot, right? Now, Lot seems to get in a lot of trouble. And part of this reason, I think we had a couple of lessons ago, when Abraham and Lot, they were all together, they had so many cattle and so many people with them that the land couldn't support both of them. So Abraham said, hey, we're related, brothers. You go this way, I'll go to the other side. You take your pick. And Lot looked at the plain of Jordan. It was well-watered, good place to be. And he set his tents facing Sodom, right? I should have made the point, I think I did then, that, hey, that's kind of indicating where his heart is. There's something about Sodom that he actually desires. So this is a point that he's there in Sodom. Now, because he's in Sodom, he's going to get in a little bit of trouble. And it just kind of follows. That kind of just the way life really is. You look down the path that you see in front of you, and you can make a choice whether to go down it or not. All right, well, Lot's made his choices, all right? Now, he's got a good friend in Abraham, and you're going to see tonight one of those instances where Abraham be a good friend to have. All right, now we got a little bit of setup here in chapter 14. All right, let's just go ahead and get with it. Father, we ask that this find people with open eyes and open ears in Jesus' name, amen. All right, Genesis chapter 14, verse 1. And it came to pass in the days of Amphrael, king of Shinar, and Anak, king of Elsar, Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of nations, that these made war with Bera, king of Sodom, and Bersha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admar, and Shember, king of Zebulon, and king of Bela, which is Zor. These were joined together in the Vale of Sidon, which is the Salt Sea. All right, so you had the first group. It included the king of Shinar, all right? So we've been studying the plain of Shinar basically since Cain got kicked out of his people, right? He went to the land of Nod, which is on the plain of Shinar. All right, this is where the Tower of Babel was. This is where all these events of the flood occurred. Noah's descendancy. Got even Abraham, his family comes from Ur, which is it's either just inside of Iraq or just inside of Iran today, all right? His whole family comes from that whole region, just a little bit off of the plain of Shinar. All right, we know that this becomes the king of Babylon later in biblical history anyway. All right, but these guys are leading the confederation against the king of Sodom and the king of Gomorrah and a bunch of other little kings in what they call the Vale of Sidon, which is the Salt Sea. So all that means is that these guys have got together with Sodom and Gomorrah, and they've got all the trade and everything locked down that's coming in off the Salt Sea. And then the people in the plain of Shinar up in there, those group, they don't like this. They consider it a threat, so they move on territories. So what we're really seeing here is a really big regional dispute that's going on between the people of the plain of Shinar and then the Vale of Sidon, which is on the Salt Sea. All right, so this is a regional dispute over territory and over goods, which is usually what leads nations to make war, even from the beginning. All right. Matter of fact, if we would go back to waging war for, I'm not even going to get into that. Let's just get on with what this says here. All right. Where are we? In the Vale of Sidon, Salt Sea, verse 4. 12 years they served Chedorlaomer. And on the 13th year, they rebelled, all right? So we got the Vale of Sidon rebelling against the kings on the plain of Shinar. And in the 14th year came Chedorlaomer, the kings that were with him, and smote the Raphaims, in Ashtaroth, Karanims, and the Zunims and Ham, and the Enims and the Shivites of Kirathaim. All right, go back up to Raphaim and Ashtaroth. Raphaim, that's another word for fallen angels. Okay, the Ashtaroth becomes a religion that's based around this. Ashtaroth is the one with the big horns, all right, and they are also one of the groups that are known to pass their children through the fire, which is a biblical expression to sacrifice their children by fire. All right, so really the kings off the plain of Shinar did us a favor by wiping them out. It was actually a pretty good thing, all right? And also the Horites and Mount Seir. The Horites, this was a group, they're not cavemen, but they lived in caves, all right? That was where they carved out their cities, all right? Unto Ephraim, which is by the wilderness. And they returned and came to Misaphat, which is in Kadesh, and smote all the country of the Amalekites, also the Amorites that dwelt in Hazazon Tamar. Verse 8, and there went out the kings of Sodom, and the kings of Gomorrah, and the king Adram, and the king Zebulun, and the king Bela, the same as Zor, and they joined battle with them in the vale of Sidon, so right there on the Salt Sea. With Chedorlaomer, the king of Elam, and Tidal, the king of nations, and Amphrael, king of Shinar, and Erech, king of Elsasar, 4 kings and 5. And the vale of Sidon was full of slime pits, and the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled and fell there. And they that remained fled to the mountains. All right. So here we have all the kings off the plain of Shinar have just cleaned house. Just flat out cleaned house altogether. They whipped up on the vale of Sidon, plus the kings of Sodom and the king of Gomorrah. So they've looted everything. Listen to what they found. And they took all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their victuals, and they went their way. And they took Lot, Abraham's brother's son, who dwelt in Sodom, and his goods, and departed. Now there's where they make their mistake. They were doing good. The kings of Shinar had just annihilated all the kings of Sidon and opened up trade now all the way through the region. But now they went ahead and took Lot. Lot looked like a good, pretty gem sitting right there in Sodom. They sacked Sodom and saw Lot and all of his possessions. Remember, they were so great that him and Abraham had to split up. So, of course, they took all of him and all of his wealth as part of that sacking of Sodom and Gomorrah. All right, listen to what it says. And there came one that escaped and told Abram the Hebrew. Now, Hebrew, this is that term that came from the word Heber. It means those that crossed the river. And we're talking about the Euphrates River, right? Those are those that came back into the region after they'd migrated out of it. Well, that was when they became known as Hebrew. All right. For he dwelt in the plain of Mamre and the Amorites, the brother of Eshcol and the brother of Aner, and these were confederates with Abram. So Abram, he's picked up with some buddies. Right? They're not a part of either one of these two other political organizations, let's just say, that are running things, right? They're kind of their little gig that they got going on, and he's made his own little agreements for safety and security with 2 other brothers. All right, listen to what it says. And when Abram heard that his brother, or they don't have really a name for nephew, but he means his nephew, his brother's son, was taken captive, he armed his trained servants, born in his house, 318, and pursued them to Dan. So he takes 318 people. See, now these are 318 people that Abram knows that he can count on. Right? They're from his house. Now look, they're trained, all right? So they're war fighters. They're not just some cowpokes running around. These are actually trained war fighters, and those are very able people. And they must be pretty confident because they are taking 318, and they're going to go chase down the kings of the plain of Shinar and get Lot back. All right? Because Lot is a part of the promise that was made to Abraham. And then Abram takes this very seriously. All right? So listen to what he says. Verse 15, and he divided himself against them, he and his servants by night, and smote them and pursued them unto Hobah, which is on the left hand of Damascus. And he brought back all the goods, and also brought again his brother Lot, and his goods, and the women also, and the people. So he's brought back everything that was raided from Sodom and Gomorrah, including Lot and his household. Okay, so Abram's looking pretty good in the eyes of all the kings of the Vale of Sidon, anyway, or what's left of them, the ones that didn't die and the ones that fled and still live. Because he was able to do what they couldn't do. They stopped them and brought back all their stuff. All right? And because of this, we're going to get introduced to a new character here tonight. Verse 17, all right? And the king of Sodom went out to meet him at the return from the slaughter of Chedorlaomer, and the kings that were with him at the valley of Shavah, which is the king's dale. All right? And that's there. And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine. And listen to what it says, and he was the priest of the Most High God. Okay. This guy named Melchizedek, there's a lot of controversy about Melchizedek, right? He's mentioned here, he's mentioned once in Psalms, and the rest of the time he's mentioned, which I think is 6 more times, is in the book of Hebrews. All right. Now, some of the things it says, let's look at the name Melchizedek. All right. Let's use, I like language, so let's break it down that way. Melchizedek. Melchizedek means king. All right. And Chezedek, it means of the Zadok, or of the justified. All right. He's called the Prince of Salem, which is peace, is what Salem actually means. So this guy is the king of the just, the king of peace. All right. The priest of the Most High God. Now, the book of Hebrews goes out and lays that out. That's the high priest. Christ was the high priest, right? Like unto Melchizedek. Why? Because he was Melchizedek. All right. We've looked at this before, right? We went to in Babylon where you have Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego thrown in the furnace. Everybody learns this little coloring book story, you know, in school, or in church when they're little. Everybody hears about the 3 Hebrew boys that were thrown into the fire, right? Well, Nebuchadnezzar looks in and he sees 4, all right? And he said, how many did I put in there? Well, we threw 3 in, but he counts 4, right? And then the 4th one was the Son of God, looked like the Son of God to him, all right? So we have Christ appearing in the Old Testament. We've also had the tree of life, or even the family that comes from the tree of life in the Garden of Eden. We have the light that was the first day. All these things are all appearances of actual God or even the Messiah, including Melchizedek. He's referred to here as the priest, not a priest, but the priest of the Most High God. There's only one of those, and that was Christ himself when he resurrected. So I truly believe that this is actually what you have, and this is what he does, all right? And he blessed him and said, blessed be Abraham, the Most High God, 19, and he blessed him and said, blessed be Abram of the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth. And he blessed the Most High God, which hath delivered thine enemies into thine hands, and he gave him tithes of all. All right, and so Abraham tithes to Melchizedek. Now, Abraham is well aware that his blessings come from God. All right. He's not just going to tithe to somebody, some priest somewhere just because. All right. But he would tithe to God himself, or to Christ, in the priest of the Most High God. And that he would have done. All right. So I truly believe this is another one of those appearances. There's a few more, actually, as you get going into the Old Testament as we go. There could be an argument made that the angel out of the book of Exodus, when we studied that remember, at one point it's a pillar of fire, but at another point it's the angel of the Lord, right? So you can make a point for not an angel, but when you get the angel of the Lord, that could also be another one of those appearances of Christ in that role. But just you got to be real scrutinizing when you read it. Does it say an angel, a strong angel, exceedingly strong? But if it says the angel, then we might be looking at something a little bit different. That's neither a break it or break it kind of a thing, but it is something to kind of keep in mind, right? Let's see. So Abraham goes through all that. Now, Melchizedek, some of the things it says in the book of Hebrews, let's just not go ahead and cover it out a little bit more. And I'm going to do this from memory. We're not going to go there, but some of the things it says about Melchizedek was that he didn't have a beginning or an end. That's the Hebrew equivalent to saying Alpha and Omega. All right? He didn't have a mother or a father. He was without beginning or without end. There's only been one of those ever that's been born. It was the one that went to meet Abraham, and Abraham tied to. It's the rest of that goes through that. But that's some interesting things about Melchizedek. Doesn't have a mother, doesn't have a father. Doesn't have a beginning, doesn't have an end. I'm the Alpha, I'm the Omega. Beginning and the end. So just kind of a little bit more kind of support that. Now we can go on. I just wanted to bring that out. All right. Let's see. Verse 21. And the king of Sodom said unto Abram, give me the person and take goods to thyself. Listen to what Abram says. And Abram said to the king of Sodom, I have lifted up mine hand unto the Lord, the Most High God, the possessor of heaven and earth, and I will not take from a thread even to a shoe latchet, and that I will not take anything that is thine, lest thou shouldest say, I have made Abram rich. Abraham said no. The king of Sodom said, this is all yours. Abram looks at him and says, no, I'm not taking nothing from you, because I don't want you to be able to say that you're the one that's made me rich, because the one that made him rich was the Most High God, and he understood that quite clearly. All right? So he says no. Listen to what he goes on and says. Save, all right, except for that which the young man hath eaten, and the portion of the men which went with me, and their Eshcol, Mamre, let them take their portion, all right? So that means, think about what the time we're in, about the rules of war. So they looted it, they went and got it back, all right? Each one of them, these people that went with Abram, was guaranteed a portion of whatever they recovered, all right? So what he's saying is then, I'm not taking anything from you, but these men that rode with me, they risked their life. They'll get Lot and all your people and all your stuff back. Give them their portion because they've earned it, but I don't want nothing from you. All right, and that's where Abram stands with it. All right? And that finishes up chapter 14. Verse 15. All right. After these things, when the word of the Lord came unto Abram in the vision, saying, fear not, Abram, I am thy shield and thy exceeding great reward. All right. And Abram said, Lord God, what wilt thou give me, seeing I go childless, and the steward of my house is Eleazar of Damascus? All right, so Abraham has already been told, hey, I'm going to make nations out of you. But here he's kind of saying, all right, I'm getting kind of old. Right, and I don't have any seed. I said, the heir in my house is a man from Damascus, not even from my house. Right? He's the one in charge of everything. And Abram said, behold, to me thou hast given no seed, and lo, one born in my house is mine heir. Talking about Eleazar. And behold, the word of the Lord came unto him, saying, this shall not be thine heir, not this guy from Damascus, but he that shall come forth out of thine own bowels shall be thine heir. Now he's talking about eventually who's it going to be? It's going to lead to Jacob, but there's going to be a little bit of a hiccup here that we're getting ready to study in the middle of all that, all right? Verse 5, and he brought him forth abroad and said, look now toward heaven, and tell the stars if thou be able to number them. He said unto him, so shall thy seed be. All right, so this is that first promise. When they look up at the stars, each one of your children was represented by one of those stars. That's a lot of kids. We're going to discover the sands of the sea is another one of those. That's a pretty big number. And so far, he has none. So you see where we're standing with it? But what did it say? And he believed in the Lord, verse 6, and he counted to him for his righteousness. Right? So He's not worried about what's going on. He believes what God has told him, all right? So he knows there's going to be a seed that comes from your own house that's going to start all this, all right? And he said unto him, I am the Lord that brought thee out of Ur of the Chaldees to give thee this land to inherit it. And he said, Lord God, whereby shall I know that I shall inherit it? And he said unto him, take me an heifer of 3 years old, and a she-goat of 3 years old, and a ram of 3 years old, and a turtle dove and a young pigeon. And he took unto him all these, and divided them in the midst, and laid them each piece one together against another, but the birds he divided not. All right. Now, I want to straighten up the picture here. He took and divided the sacrifices up, like for sacrifices, all right, and he touched them one to each side, but there's a path that goes right down the middle of it. And the doves he didn't divide because they're small, and he didn't divide those up. All right, listen to what it says, verse 11. And when the fowls and when the fowls came down upon the carcass, Abraham drove them away. All right, he's not willing to let this be scavenged. All right, the sacrifice. And the sun was gone down, and deep sleep fell upon Abram, and lo, and horror, a great darkness fell upon him. And he said unto Abram, know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and they shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. All right, and this is where we picked it up in the book of Exodus when we started studying that on Wednesday nights. All right, was with that statement. All right, and also that nation whom thou shalt serve will I judge. All right, remember those plagues? And afterwards shall they come out with great substance. And remember when we started studying about the Ark of the Covenant last week, right? Part of that great substance that they came out of Egypt with. And thou shalt go to thy fathers in peace, and thou shalt be buried in a great old age. So he's going to live quite old. And he's getting already pretty old already. All right, but yet Isaac's not even been born yet. All right, we're getting ready to go into the hiccup. But in the 14th generation, they shall come hither again, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full, but it will be in so many generations after they come out. You get what he said? The Amorites, they're not done. They've not sinned, but they've not made me mad enough yet. But they're gonna in the future, and that's when they're going to come back into the picture in this area, and that's exactly what he's telling them, right? Then it came to pass that when the sun went down, and it was dark, behold, a smoking furnace, a burning lamp that passed between these pieces. All right. Now, let me explain what this means. Because this is like a vow in the Old Testament. And the custom was that the sacrifice that was associated with the vow that you laid down out, just like he's laid out everything. Right? And then whatever the vow was that you're taking, you would walk in between the pieces and you would simply recite the vow as you walked in between the sacrifices that represented this vow as you did it. Now, that was the custom. So here what you see is he's had Abraham lay out all these sacrifices associated with this promise that he's just made him about his seed being more exceeding than the stars of heaven itself. And this represents God then coming to Abraham and walking amongst the sacrifice that Abraham was prepared, reciting his vow that he just made to Abraham. So this is a very deep, very, very profound kind of a thing that's going on here with Abram. And that's what that's really about. And verse 18, in the same day the Lord made a covenant with Abraham, saying, unto thy seed have I given this land, from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates. And the Kenites, the sons of Cain, and the Kenzites, and the Kadmonites, and the Hittites, and the Perizzites, and the Rephaim, the fallen angels, and the Amorites, and the Canaanites, the sons of Canaan, out of the days of Noah, and the Gershonites, and the Jebusites. The Jebusites are the people that found Jerusalem. It was called Jebus. All right? So all these lands he's going to give to them. All right? Now listen, we got a little bit more. We're going to cover this just a little bit because this is very important. All right? Now listen to what it says. Because we've had the promise made, right? Abraham said he believed God when he promised him. Even though he was getting really old and he doesn't have any seed yet, he did believe him. He saw the promise reenacted right there in front of him with the sacrifice, with the presence of God as he takes the vow and it walks through the sacrifice just like his people would have done. All right? And Abraham believes that. But the other part to this is Sarah, or Sarai. All right, so there's another half to this. So listen to what it says. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, bare him no children. All right, we've already talked about this, all right? And she had an handmaid, an Egyptian whose name was Hagar. All right, so we have an Egyptian woman here that's a handmaid for Sarai. All right, and Sarah said unto Abraham, Behold now, the Lord hath restrained me from bearing. I pray thee, go in unto my maid. It may be that I may obtain children by her. Okay, and Abram hearkened to the voice of Sarai. And Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, her handmaid, the Egyptian, after Abraham had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan, and gave her to her husband Abraham to be his wife. So Abraham, I have to readjust some of the things I've said before. I've always said that Abraham never did have more than one wife at a time. That he marries another woman after Sarah dies, but actually no. This is exactly the same setup that Patriarch Prime, Jacob, goes through with his two wives. They each do just the exact same thing with one of their handmaids, giving Jacob 4 wives. And here, Sarai has picked a wife just like with Jacob. The biblical, now, okay, let's talk about plural marriage then, because that's what this is all about. All right. The biblical example is not that a man gets to look around and say, I want this woman, I want that woman, I want that woman. All right. What you see every time is the biblical example about plural marriage is that the previous wife, the first wife, is the one that looks around and says, no, you can marry her. All right. Now, the reason being is because a man is going to pick a wife for a much different reason than what a woman is going to pick a wife for. Now, this makes this kind of fair, all right? If I have never wife, but I get to pick who she is, all right? So you're going to see alliances made, all right? And what you're going to see is in the biblical example, just because there's a biblical example doesn't mean that there's not some bad stuff that starts to go on. All right? And that's one of the first things we're going to pick up on here real quick, all right? Now, with all that being said, let's see what it says, because we do have a plural marriage going on here. All right, this is polygyny. We got more than one wife going on. All right, let's see what happens as a result of this. And Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, her handmaid, the Egyptian, gave him to be his wife. We already did that one. Verse 4. And he went into Hagar, and she conceived. And when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress was despised in her eyes. Whoa, wait a minute. Sarai picked Hagar to be the next wife, and when she conceives, now she's thumbing her nose at her boss, basically. That's what she was. She was a handmaid. All right? So now she's getting a little bit bitter about this. She's like, oh, look, I've got the baby now. I am a big part of the promise to Abraham, not you, Sarah. So she starts to be kind of hoardy and holds this over her a little bit too much. All right? And Sarah said unto Abram, My wrong be upon thee. I have given my maid into thy bosom. And when she saw that she had conceived, I was despised in her eyes. The Lord judge between me and thee. All right? Is that I've done this to her and she's done this to me. I want God to judge what's going on. All right? And that's exactly what's getting ready to happen. And Sarah, between me and thee. Verse 6. But Abram said unto Sarah, all right, so this is Abraham talking to his first wife. Behold, thy maid is in thy hand. All right? You're the boss. She's your maid. Do what you want. All right? Do to her as it pleaseth thee. And when Sarah dealt hardly with her, she fled from her face. So Sarah gave her a good chewing, apparently. Or maybe not one. Let's just say this keeps going on. Let's just say, well, she was being a little bit. Well, now she starts picking back at Hagar. Probably a long time. Probably making it to where nothing Hagar does is right. You see what I'm saying? So she starts fighting back all because of Abraham's promise that she has. Did you, your maid, please deal with her how you feel. like you should feel like you should. All right? Listen to what it says. But Hagar took off, all right? And the angel of the Lord, all right? So here we have that one again, the angel of the Lord. Not an angel, but this is the angel, just like the high priest of the Lord, all right? The angel of the Lord found her by a fountain of water in the wilderness, by the fountain in the way of Shur. And he said, Hagar, Sarai's maid, whence comest thou? And whither wilt thou go? Says, where'd you come from and where do you think you're going? All right. And she said, I fled from the face of my mistress Sarai. And the angel of the Lord said unto her, return to thy mistress. All right. And submit thyself under her hands. All right. We've talked about biblical law, right? She got 6 years. It's not written down that way as of yet, but it was going to be. All right. So it was her place. Sarai made her a wife, but she still was a subordinate to the main wife, to Sarai, okay? She's still her boss. That's still her handmaid. It may be another one of Abraham's wives, but it's still her handmaid, all right? And she's made that apparently abundantly clear. But here, the angel of the Lord is telling her to go back, submit. That's your position in that household, all right? It's her handmaid. So he's telling her to go back, just suck it up, buttercup, and go back. All right? And the angel of the Lord said unto her, now wait, this is one of the reasons she's going to go back. So listen to this. And this is the only place that you're going to get this of a woman. And the angel of the Lord said unto her, I will multiply thy seed exceedingly, that it shall not be numbered of multitude. Now this is the only place I know of in the entire Bible that a woman is promised that her seed, not her husband's, no, but her seed is going to be so abundant that it can't be numbered. All right, and listen to what it says. And the angel of the Lord said unto her, behold, thou art with child, and shall bear a son, and shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord hath heard thy affliction. And he will be a wild man. His hand will be against every man, and every man's hand against him, and he shall dwell in the presence of all of his brethren. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later, exactly who these people are. All right? And she called the name of the Lord that spake with her, thou God seest me. For she said, have I also here looked after him that seeth me? Now this is not translated really well, but it'll make sense once I tell you this. The convention was that if you've seen God, you're dead. Right? We've talked a little bit about this before, right? Unless there's a special exception, like here we've got, Melchizedek. We've got here the angel of the Lord. So there's been some, we've got Moses on Mount Sinai. So there's biblical precedents for showing exceptions to that. But what she is saying is, what she's getting at is I have seen God and survived, is really what she's saying. It is that, wow, I've looked upon God himself and I've lived to tell about it. Is really what she's getting at. Is the point to what she's saying. And so that's why she's kind of excited about it. It's like, wow, I've actually seen the face of God and survived to actually tell people all about it. All right, but what does she tell them? Wherefore the well was called Beer-Lahai, or however you say it. Behold, it is between Kadesh and Bered. And Hagar bare Adam a son, and Abraham called his name, which Hagar bare Ishmael, because Hagar told him what the angel of the Lord had said, and Abraham listens to God. So when this son was born, he called him exactly what he was told to call him, was Ishmael. All right. Now, Abraham loves this boy. He really loves this boy. This is his first son. Yet, it is not through Sarah. It's through Sarah's handmaid, who is an Egyptian. So these people are half Egyptian and half Hebrew. Okay, so there's more to this. And Abraham was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael to Abraham. And I think that is probably where we're going to stop, because I want to take this next section as one piece. But that sets up everything to do with Ishmael. Now, Ishmael's a main player today. All right? And next Sunday, we're going to discover exactly who he is and exactly what's going on with him. But make no mistake about it. These people that we're talking about here that have these promises made to them, every one of them are players currently today. These people, he didn't promise these things for them just to be a thing of the past. He promised these things way back in the past so we'd understand that they're current events that we deal with today. And that's why they've been preserved all this long to the last days and time when we stand. So each one of these things are very important, and we're going to cover some kind of, as we get through the Genesis, this is not all we're going to hear about this guy Ishmael. He stays as part of a character, at least in the background, through quite a bit of part of Genesis, at least until Abraham's death. All right? So that's a good place to stop tonight. I know it's a little bit short, but I like to keep certain things in certain blocks because I don't want to stop halfway through an idea and then wait a whole week to try and pick the idea back up again. So sometimes it's just the way it goes. Maybe next week we go 2 hours. I'm just kidding. I can't do that. Anyway, you guys have a good night. We'll see you next week.